All right, we're back, and let's start with the planning phase. We're just going to get right into it. So when I do bird photography, I really just use 4 apps that help me plan for the upcoming trip. So 2 of them I use while I'm at the location, and the other 2 I do for pre-planning. So the 2 that I use for pre-planning are the Weather Channel to make sure that I am comfortable while I'm on location, whether heat or cold, whatever, rain, make sure that we are covering our gear, protecting our gear as well as ourselves. So the first one is the Weather Channel. So we'll go up here and type in the Weather Channel. So we know we're going to Flagstaff. So we'll pull up Flagstaff and then the 10-day forecast. Close the ad here. So then I got the 10-day forecast, so I'll know what to expect weather-wise, temperature-wise, and if there's rain while I'm out there to make sure I am prepared. So one caveat, I am recording this after the trip. So if you see dates here that are not coinciding with the next videos, I apologize. I was not able to record this portion before the other. So, but it still gives me what I need. This is what I did prior to heading out to the location. So here you can see we've got, looks like mid to low 80s for the highs, and then the lows we're looking at mid to high 50s, which is not too bad. I know that I can get away with shorts, t-shirt, and still be comfortable on location. So here you can see there are rain showers, thunderstorms in the mornings, afternoons, scattered throughout the day. At the time that I went, there was no rain. But if I were to do this trip upcoming, I would know that I need to pack rain gear for me as well as my equipment to protect my equipment. All right, that's first. Second, we go to ebird.org, and this will let me know what species of birds have been seen recently. So if we go here to Explore tab, here where it says Explore Hotspots, and we zoom into Flagstaff, which is right here. So prior to me shooting this video, or I should say when I actually did my research, there was 3 areas that were noted for observing the species that I was looking at, specifically the osprey and the bald eagle. So the first one is right here where it says Kachina Wetlands Preserve. Go into view detail, all species, and in here where it'll tell you what species was seen, how many of them were seen, and then the date they were seen. So that's really what I look for. And here, let's see, we have, so we're looking for the osprey and the bald eagle. And it looks like it has not been seen, either species, in a while. So we're on July 9. So now we're getting into where when I was actually in Flagstaff. So you can see here the 4th of July, 2 osprey were seen, and then 1 bald eagle. So then I know that this is a location where I have a higher chance to photograph those specific birds. All right, so if we go back to the hotspot, the second area is Walnut Canyon Lake, which is right here. And we look at it, here you can see those 232 species observed. Go to view details. And well, you can see here 22nd of July, which was about a week ago. Bald eagle was spotted. So let's go back to the time frame I was there. So right here you can see there was 2 ospreys observed on the 1st of July. Now you got to understand that this is inputted by people like you and I who actually go out there and observe these birds and put it into the website. So this is a guide to go by, not necessarily the end all be all, okay? Because these birds could have been there in between these dates, we don't know, but this is a good guide to go by, okay? Let's go back, and the last location was Lower Lake Mary. So Lower Lake Mary, we go in here and you can see there's already a red-tailed hawk. Here we go. Osprey observed, 2 of them on the 21st of July. 2 bald eagles, same day. Then we keep scrolling down to about the time frame. Well, obviously there was a lot of birds observed because it only goes to the 20th of July. So we'd have to go here where it says custom time period, and then you can put in whatever month, and obviously 2024 is where we're in. Or right here, where is it? Well, this is not really a tutorial about eBird, but you can actually put in and say observed within the last week, the last 2 weeks, I believe, within like the last month, and then they give you a more detailed list of what was out there. But these are the 2 primary, I guess, apps, because I do have them on my phone, and eBird is the only one that I really look at here on the computer, just because it's more detailed. On your phone app, it doesn't go into a breakdown the way it does here. So the other 2 that I use on location when I go scouting. First one is PhotoPills, which is a app that you have to buy, and at the time that I bought it was, I believe, $10. Which was several years ago. I don't know what the price of it is now, but it has been instrumental in not just my wildlife photography, but in my landscape photography as well. So with that, I can see the time of sunrise and sunset. And when you go into the augmented reality tab, you can actually see where the sun is going to go, where the sun rises, the arc in the sky, and then where it sets, which for me, when I do wildlife, I'll do it either sunrise, early morning, or sunset, get that beautiful golden light to help with really making that subject pop out. And then the second one I use is Windy, W-I-N-D-Y, windy.com, which is also an app on the phone. And what I'll do is I'll use it to see where the wind direction's coming from, so I can set up, and I'll talk more about that in the next video. But those are really the apps that I use to help me plan my photography trip, especially for bird photography. When we get into land-based animals, that's a whole different story, and we'll get to that down the road. But that is going to really be it for the planning phase. I really don't do much more other than that. So coming up next, we're going to go into the gear that I use out in the field and what I pack it in. So we'll see you in a minute. All right, we're back. So now that we know the location we're going to, we know what to pack clothing wise, you know, how it's going to be, how cold it's going to be, whether it's going to be raining or not. So those are all good things that we need to know prior to heading to our location so we can properly pack for it. There's no need to go out and get the latest and greatest gear, and there's no need to oversimplify what you need to get out there and start shooting images of beautiful animals. So we'll start here with the camera. So this here is the Sony Alpha 7R3. Now this camera, I believe, is roughly 7 years old. It's not the latest and greatest, but it still works wonderful. Now, the autofocus system is not what it is with the cameras today, because technology changes and it evolves, it gets better. Yes, I would love to have the autofocus of the A9 or the A1, but I can't afford those cameras right now. So this is what I have, this is what I'm using, and to this date has been doing just fine. So you don't have to go out there and spend $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 on a brand new camera to go out and do wildlife photography. You can use the camera that you have now, and more than likely it will work for what you need. Okay, this particular camera only shoots 10 frames a second at its highest shooting capacity or shooting ability. Okay, so you don't have to have 30 frames, 120 frames per second. Like, that's wonderful, that's great. However, at the end of the day, when you come back home and you have to download the cards and you have to go through the pictures, I'd rather go through a couple hundred than a couple thousand. So keep that in mind when you shoot your burst, okay? The lens that I have on here now is the 24-70, which I will only use maybe 1% of the time if I have an animal that is docile, that is not dangerous, and I want to do an environmental portrait, then I would use this lens. But other than that, that 24-70 doesn't even, it stays in my bag, okay? The main lens that I use is this one right here. So this here is the Sony 200 to 600 millimeter. It's a f5.6 to, I believe it's f22. I have it covered so I can't see, but I'll list it on there. I believe it's f22. It is a variable aperture. It's not a cheap lens. However, it's not an $11,000, $12,000, $13,000 lens. Those, I believe the 400 is a 2.8 and it's $11,000 or $12,000. The 600 is an f4 or 5.6 and that's $13,000. There is a huge price point, but the lenses are worth it if you can afford it. This is not my primary job. This is not how I make a living. So the 200 to 600 is perfect. Now, with that said, you don't have to go out and buy this lens or, equivalent for whatever system you're using. If you have a lens that reaches out to roughly 300 millimeters, that is the shortest focal length that I recommend that you have to go shooting wildlife. And the reason being is you're not going to be able to get up close to the wildlife, to photograph them. So you have to have a lens that reaches out. Okay. And eventually you're going to have to crop. Even with a 200 to 600, I'm still having to crop because I just can't get close enough, especially to birds. Okay. So something that's minimum 300 millimeters is recommended. So if you have like a kit lens that does, I don't know, 300 or 400 millimeters, use that. Eventually, if you get serious enough in your hobby, or maybe eventually you want to make this a career and start working up, this is a good lens to start out with. If you can't afford the $12,000, $13,000 lenses, this lens works very, very well. The autofocus is wonderful. It's great. It works just fine. My only downfall with this lens is low light performance. In twilight and blue hour, the autofocus does not work very well. And that's just because of, I don't want to say the design of the lens, but the limitations of the lens. Because at 6.3, that's still a pretty closed down aperture compared to f4 or f2.8, where their wider apertures and more light comes in. This is where this lens struggles. So I'll get to a location at twilight or blue hour and set up and get ready to go. And that way by the time the light comes on where this lens starts to work, I'm out there and I'm taking images. Okay. So that's another thing, is make sure you know the limitations of your gear. Don't try to take a portrait or an image of a bird or any kind of wildlife in the time that your lenses or your gear just won't be able to work or perform at its best. Okay. Next thing I have on this is a multi-piece cover, and this is great because what it does is, one, protects it from scratches, and two, it has a light moisture protection. So I'm saying mist, light, very light rain, this will protect the lens. Anything else above that, I highly recommend that you get a lens cover. I want to say Think Tank has a few different models of it to protect your gear. Okay, it's an investment. Things aren't cheap. The 200 to 600, I want to say, is $2,000 US. So you want to protect your gear as much as you possibly can. Okay. So my secondary lens is the 70 to 200 millimeters. This is also a Sony. This is the, let's say it's the G Master. So this is the version 1. Oh, and that's another thing I forgot to mention. This 200 to 600 is the same color as this one. And having the cover on it will not make you a beacon out there as far as, being able to spot a white lens out there. Eventually I'll get a cover for this one, but I don't use this one as often. And I might start changing that depending on whether I get teleconverters or not. There's a big debate right now about teleconverters, whether you should use them or not. On premium glass like this, you're okay to use teleconverters. It's going to make the image a little bit softer. It's not going to be as sharp, but you can fix that in post-processing. Okay. If I put a 2-time teleconverter on this 70 to 200, it'll become a 140 to 400. And, if I open this up at 2.8, putting it a 2-time teleconverter, I will lose 2 stops of light. So we're looking at f5.6 at 400 millimeters. I think that's a pretty good give and take. So this is my secondary lens, and I only use that either in very extreme low light because I can open the aperture up to 2.8, which that's 2.5, 2 1/3 stops more open than the 200 to 600, so it'll let more light in, and I can crank that shutter speed up a little bit so I don't get motion blur. Okay. All right. So next thing you need is a tripod, and you cannot. I shouldn't say you cannot. You can do wildlife photography without a tripod. However, once you start getting into these heavy lenses, you're not gonna want to be out there without a tripod. One. Two, when you're in a low light situation, just after blue hour, your shutter speeds aren't going to be as high, so you're going to want a tripod to steady. Now, once again, you don't have to have an expensive tripod if you're starting out. Make sure your tripod is steady. If you have a tripod with a center column, I recommend that you do not extend that center column. And the reason being is because it makes the platform less stable. So you're going to introduce motion blur into your shots if your shutter speed is not high enough. Okay. So make sure that you have a steady tripod. The one I have here is Robus. It is not cheap, but it is not like a Manfrotto or, some of the high-end ones out there that are $900, $1,000, $1,500. This Robus I bought, I want to say 2019, because it was just before COVID, at the WPPA conference in Las Vegas. It is a $500. This particular model is $500, and it does not come with a head. But before this tripod, I've already gone through 4, which at that point is the same price as this. And this has already lasted me, 5, 6 years now. And I still haven't had any issues. It works great. So, all right, next thing, since heads are going to be an issue, I do not recommend a ball head when you're doing wildlife photography. And the reason being is when you're tracking your bird or animal and you have that ball head loose, that thing is going to go every which way. It's not going to be steady. So you're going to have issues tracking or panning or tilting and shifting depending on whether you're photographing birds. So I highly, highly recommend that you use a gimbal head. And I don't have it here with me. I actually have it in the other room. But I'll put a picture of it so you can see. That gimbal head is specifically for larger lenses to do wildlife photography because it has pretty smooth tracking ability and it supports your lens and your camera combination. Now the head that I have on here now, this is actually a video head, and this one is made by Manfrotto. And the reason I use this one over the gimbal head is because now I shoot video as well as stills. So when I do my vlogs or any kind of tutorials, like I'll shoot video of the wildlife that I am about to take images of. So you can kind of see where I'm at, what's happening, and kind of give you a sense of place of where I'm at. So that's the reason why I use this. And the fluid head is what I need for video versus the free spin of the gimbal, because it doesn't have a fluid head. So when I'm trying to pan, it's almost like a jerk movement when I start off versus a resistance that the fluid head has. So it's a nice, easy pan or tilt because it does both. So tripod is highly recommended that you use, especially if you have the bigger lenses, because eventually you're going to get tired and you're going to want to have that tripod. All right, next piece of equipment is binos. I almost want to say this is a must-have rather than a need-to-have. And the reason being is you don't want to have your face plastered in the back of the camera if you are looking for subjects to photograph. And the reason being is, one, you're going to have eye fatigue because you're only going to be using one eye on that viewfinder. And secondly, the field of view is narrower than if you were to use binos. Thirdly, you have more freedom of movement using binos than being on your camera, okay? You don't have to have an expensive pair of binos. I got these on Amazon. I believe they were $30 or $40. This particular one is Echocra. I apologize for butchering the name, but it is a good pair of binos. It's clear, it's optic, and this one is a 12x42, so it gives me a little bit of reach out there, and it's actually a little bit more reach than my 200 to 600. But having that wider field of view as I'm searching for my subjects that I want to photograph, it's easier to see. You have, a wider field of view that you can see. 1, 2, you're using 2 eyes, so your eye fatigue is not going to be as bad. And if you spot your, subject that you want to photograph, it's an easy change over to your camera and start photographing. So I highly recommend that you get yourself a set of binos when you go out there. And lastly, what I use is a camping chair. Now, this is a need to have, not necessarily a must have. For me, it is. I am an Army veteran, and while I was deployed to Iraq in 2003, I ended up having issues medically, and when I got out, I had to have several surgeries on my feet, so I'm not able to stand and walk as long as I used to while I was in the Army. So what I do is I trade off between sitting down and standing up, and then as I do my vlogs, I'll sit on this and talk to you guys that way. So this is a very compact camp chair. Basically opens up to almost nothing. So this is as big as it gets right here. All right. Once you set it up, this is it right here. And then this sets on here, and then it becomes the chair. So it's easy, it's compact, it's light, and it fits in my bag. And speaking of my bag, what I pack all this in is this is the Mindshift Backlight 36 liter. This is a umbrella company of Think Tank, and I've had this now for 7 years, I believe, 6 years, maybe a little less. I'll put it below. But this is the basically adventure series of the Think Tank. It's a little bit more rugged. It has a little bit more weatherproofing. I've had this everywhere I've gone so far. It works great for me, and it opens up on the back, and it's a modular system, so you can change the compartments however you want. And it also comes with an extra rain fly that you put on the exterior of your bag, and it makes it even more waterproof. So that's it. In a nutshell, that is the gear that I'll be taking with me to go photographing for the osprey and bald eagles. All right, everybody, this is pretty much the end of the video. I did want to do a side note real quick. Another resource that I use is this book. It is Birds of North America. It's a new edition, and it is put out by the American Museum of Natural History. And as you can see here on the osprey page, it kind of gives you a photograph and a little explanation of the bird itself and then where they're located in North America. And it gives you a couple tips here and there. And here on the bald eagle, you really see the pictures is where it's really helpful here, because for the longest time, I did not know that bald eagles didn't get their white feathers until they're 5 years old. So this is also another resource that you can use. It's really helpful. It's not cheap by any means. I just happened to see it while my daughter and I were at Barnes & Noble, and I started flipping through the pages and saw how helpful it would be for wildlife photography, specifically for birds. So that is another option. Obviously, there's other resources out there on the internet that's free, but that's just another resource that you can use. So I do want to thank everyone for hanging out with me, and if you've stayed this long, I would appreciate if you drop a comment in the comment section saying hello. I would like to personally say hello and thank you for hanging out with me. So coming up next week, the next video is going to be us going to the destination, be checking into my hotel room, and then possibly doing some scouting. And that's where I'll use the PhotoPills app and the Windy app to kind of see where I can set up in those locations where it'd be optimum for bird photography. All right. So if you like this video and this video has brought value to you, please hit that like button, because it will help get this out there to other photographers. And if you want to continue to hang out with me, consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. That way, when the video drops next week, you guys will be alerted and you won't miss out. So until then, we'll see you.